October 12, 1942. Iron Bottom Sound, off Guadalcanal. The sea is black and flat, barely moving, reflecting no moonlight at all. Commander Hiroshi Tanaka of the Imperial Japanese Navy leans against the rail of his cruiser, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. The night air is heavy with salt and fuel oil. Somewhere beyond the horizon, American ships sit at anchor, clumsy, loud, predictable, or so he has been taught. Night is where Japan rules. For decades, the Imperial Navy has trained for this. Long hours of night navigation, signal lamps flashing coded orders, crews drilled to move silently, to load and fire by feel alone. While other navies slept, Japan learned to kill in the dark. Tanaka allows himself a thin smile. The Americans, he believes, fear the night. They rely on visibility, on daylight formations, on procedures written for peacetime exercises. Their commanders trust machines, tables, instruments. Tonight, those beliefs will be tested. The order comes quietly. Engines increase speed. Guns are readied. Torpedoes are checked one last time. The long, lethal Type 93, Long Lance, a weapon American sailors still do not fully understand. Above them, Japanese aircraft are already moving. Twin-engine G4M, Betty bombers lift from distant airfields, climbing into the darkness, their crews confident. For months now, they have struck American positions at Guadalcanal after sunset with near impunity. Bombs falling out of the night. Ships burning before anyone can react. The Americans have tried to answer. Searchlights, barrage fire, guesswork. It has not worked. Japanese commanders laugh quietly at reports of American radio detection experiments. Radar, they call it. An immature technology. Bulky, unreliable. Something that might help ships avoid collisions, not win battles. Tanaka has read the intelligence summaries. Radar effectiveness exaggerated, one memo concludes, dependent on operator skill, vulnerable to weather and countermeasures. In other words, not decisive. The cruiser glides forward, its wake barely visible. Tanaka's mind is already working through the attack plan. Approach under cover of darkness. Close range. Sudden illumination. Torpedoes first, guns second. The Americans will never see it coming. What Tanaka does not know, what no one on his bridge truly understands, is that the Americans are already watching him. Far away, aboard a U.S. Navy destroyer, a young radar operator sits hunched over a glowing scope in a darkened compartment. The room smells of hot electronics and sweat. The only sound is the soft hum of equipment and the scratch of a pencil on a plotting board. A blip appears, then another. The operator freezes, then leans closer. "Contact," he says, voice low but urgent. Multiple returns. Bearing 270. Range. Closing. Above decks, the American ship remains dark. No searchlights, no gunfire. Nothing to give away the fact that the night has just changed hands. The information moves fast. From radar room to bridge, from bridge to task group, bearings calculated, speed estimated, interceptors launched. At Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, American pilots are being shaken awake. "Bogies inbound," a controller tells them. "Vector coming." In the cockpit of an F-4F Wildcat, Lieutenant James Red Halverson straps in under dim red lights. The engine coughs, then roars. He has flown night interceptions before, clumsy, nerve-wracking affairs where the enemy often slipped away unseen. But tonight feels different. On his radio, a calm voice begins to speak. "Red 2, turn right, heading 180. Climb to 5,000. You've got traffic 12 miles out." Halverson swallows. Traffic. Someone can see them. As Tanaka's cruiser closes in, the first sign that something is wrong is not an explosion. It is silence. No American searchlights snap on. No panicked gunfire erupts. No flares drift upward. Instead, anti-aircraft guns begin firing with precision, not wildly into the sky, but at specific points in the darkness. Bursts blossom exactly where Japanese bombers should be. One bomber vanishes in a sudden orange flash. Another breaks formation, engine smoking. On the bridge, Tanaka grips the rail harder. "This is unusual," an officer says carefully. Tanaka does not answer. Above, American fighters appear out of nowhere, guided by voices Japanese pilots cannot hear. Tracers slice through the night. Bombers scatter. Attacks fall apart before they ever reach their targets. The night is no longer empty. It is mapped, measured, controlled. For the first time since the campaign began, Japanese night attackers are not hunters. They are being hunted, and as Tanaka watches the darkness erupt with unexpected precise violence, a thought he has never seriously entertained begins to form. What if the Americans are not blind at night? What if the night no longer belongs to Japan? October 13th to 15th, 1942, Guadalcanal and Iron Bottom Sound. By dawn, the Japanese commanders know something has gone wrong. Not decisively, not yet, but enough to unsettle assumptions that have guided them since the opening months of the war. Reports arrive piecemeal. Bombers forced to jettison ordnance early. Torpedoes launched without targets acquired. Crews returning, shaken, speaking of gunfire that seemed to anticipate their movements. Commander Tanaka stands over a chart table, listening as a junior officer reads from a hastily compiled after-action report. Anti-aircraft fire was unusually accurate, the officer says, choosing his words carefully. Searchlights were not used. Fighters appeared without warning. Tanaka nods slowly. Luck, another officer offers. Weather, coincidence. Tanaka does not disagree, but he does not agree either. For the Americans, this is not coincidence. Below decks on U.S. Navy cruisers and destroyers, radar operators work through the night in rotating shifts. Their eyes burn from staring at glowing scopes. Coffee cups pile up. Pencils wear down to stubs. The technology is crude by later standards. SG surface search radar, CXAM air search sets, bulky and temperamental. But it works. More importantly, it is improving nightly as operators learn to interpret ghostly returns, separate clutter from threat, and trust what the screen tells them over what their eyes cannot see. On Guadalcanal, the radar station at Henderson Field becomes the nerve center of night defense. Operators track incoming aircraft long before engines are audible. Controllers relay vectors calmly, precisely. American pilots are still uneasy about night flying. Landing on Henderson's rough strip in darkness remains terrifying. But the difference now is direction. They are no longer searching blindly. They are being guided. Lieutenant Halverson feels it in the cockpit. The radio voice, measured, confident, talks him onto targets he cannot yet see. Turn left 10 degrees. They're crossing your nose now. Moments later, shapes emerge against the faint glow of clouds. A Japanese bomber looms suddenly in his windshield. Halverson fires instinctively. Tracers stitch across the fuselage. The bomber drops away, burning. He exhales, heart pounding. Someone had led him straight to it. Night after night, the pattern repeats. Japanese attacks grow less coordinated. Bombers arrive staggered, formations broken by interceptions they never expected. Torpedo runs are aborted. Crews complain that American fire begins before visual contact is made. Still, Japanese doctrine resists the explanation. Radar, many senior officers insist, cannot be this effective. It relies on electricity, on fragile equipment, on operators who must surely make mistakes under pressure. Human eyesight, trained and disciplined, remains superior, especially at night. Tanaka listens, but doubts deepen. During a staff meeting aboard his flagship, an intelligence officer presents captured American documents, radar schematics, operating procedures, training notes. Tanaka studies them silently. This is not experimentation. This is a system. The Americans are not relying on radar alone. They are integrating it, feeding information from ship to ship, from shore to air, from operator to pilot. Redundancies exist. If one set fails, another covers. If one operator errs, another cross-checks. The realization is uncomfortable. Japan trained men to master the night. America trained machines, and then trained men to trust them. On October 15th, Tanaka orders another night approach. He needs confirmation, proof. Either radar's success is exaggerated, or it is changing the war. As his ships advance, the same thing happens. American vessels remain dark. No early firing, no panic. Then, without warning, shells begin falling with uncanny accuracy. Radar-directed gunfire brackets Japanese ships before visual contact is made. Torpedoes miss as evasive maneuvers begin earlier than expected. The engagement breaks off quickly, too quickly. Tanaka retreats, jaw tight, mind racing. Back in his cabin, he writes a brief note for his superior, carefully worded, cautious, but unmistakable. American night defense effectiveness increasing. Suspect radar integration more advanced than previously assessed. It is not an admission of failure, but it is the first crack. The laughter has stopped. The night, once Japan's greatest ally, is no longer empty. It is occupied, measured, and increasingly hostile. Late October-November 1942, Rabaul to Guadalcanal. The problem with doctrine is that it works, until it doesn't. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, night warfare is not simply a tactic, it is identity. It is proof that spirit, training, and discipline can overcome material disadvantage. It is what allowed Japan to strike Pearl Harbor, to dominate the early months of the Pacific War, to humiliate fleets that relied too heavily on machines. To question night superiority is to question the foundation of victory itself. That is why Commander Tanaka's report is received coolly. At Rabaul, senior staff officers skim the wording, nod politely, and set it aside. American radar, they agree, may be improving, but not enough to overturn decades of hard-earned night-fighting mastery. The enemy is adapting, one captain says. That is expected. They will make mistakes. Another adds, machines cannot replace judgment. Tanaka does not argue, but he watches the next operations unfold and sees fewer mistakes on the American side, not more. Japanese bomber crews begin reporting losses that cannot be explained by chance. Night fighters intercepted before reaching target areas. Anti-aircraft fire opening at exactly the right altitude, at exactly the right moment. American ships maneuvering before torpedoes are launched, as if warned in advance. The most unsettling detail is consistency. This is not a lucky night. It is every night. Japanese radar technology exists, but it is primitive, fragmented, and mistrusted. Sets are installed experimentally on a handful of ships, often ignored by commanders who prefer visual confirmation. Training is limited. Integration is minimal. Most importantly, Japanese doctrine treats radar as an aid. American doctrine treats it as a decision-maker. At Guadalcanal, this difference becomes deadly. Night raids that once terrorized Henderson Field now arrive piecemeal. Controllers vector American fighters into interception positions before Japanese aircraft even realize they've been detected. Pilots accustomed to surprise now find themselves reacting, dodging, scattering, aborting. One Japanese aviator writes later, "We were no longer striking from darkness. We were striking into it." On the surface, American ships fight differently now. Radar-directed fire control allows cruisers and destroyers to engage without illuminating themselves. Gunnery officers fire on coordinates not shadows. Ranges are calculated, updated, refined in real time. Japanese ships, trained to rely on visual cues, struggle to respond. Spotting splashes in the dark is useless when the enemy adjusts fire electronically. The night battle that once favored patience now favors information. Tanaka feels it most acutely during a failed harassment run in early November. His ships never even reach effective range. American destroyers intercept first, guided by radar unseen. A brief exchange of fire, then withdrawal. No decisive clash, just denial. Back at Rabaul, losses mount quietly. Aircraft crews rotate faster. Replacement pilots arrive with fewer hours. Night training continues, but against an enemy that no longer behaves as expected. Morale does not collapse. Confidence does. The laughter about American radar, the jokes, the dismissive briefings, fades. Not replaced by panic, but by unease. Senior officers begin requesting more information, more data, more reports. Too late. Because radar is not something that can be countered quickly with courage or technique. It requires industry, standardization, and time. All things Japan is now short of. By December 1942, Japanese planners face an impossible contradiction. Their doctrine demands night operations. Their enemy has turned the night against them. They attempt adaptations, higher altitude approaches, dispersed formations, erratic timing. Each adjustment is met, within days, by an American response. Radar operators learn. Controllers refine vectors. Gunnery improves. The Americans are not improvising anymore. They are iterating. Tanaka understands now what he is watching. This is not a technological trick. It is a learning system, and Japan is not inside it. As the campaign grinds on, the strategic consequences become clear. Night no longer provides safe passage. Supplies are harder to deliver. Bombardments are less effective. Attrition increases without corresponding results. Guadalcanal, once meant to be starved into submission under cover of darkness, refuses to fall. Not because American soldiers are braver, but because American machines are awake when Japanese doctrine assumes sleep. Tanaka writes another report, longer this time, more explicit. Enemy radar-directed operations have fundamentally altered night combat conditions. It is the closest he comes to admitting the truth. The Americans have not simply defended against night attacks. They have rewritten the night, and in doing so, they have taken away Japan's greatest advantage. Not with a battle, but with a process. December 1942, January 1943, Guadalcanal. By the end of the year, the night no longer feels neutral. It feels watched. For Japanese air crews approaching Guadalcanal after sunset, there is a new, oppressive sensation. Not fear exactly, but anticipation. Engines hum steadily, the darkness ahead unchanged, and yet every man in the aircraft feels it. They know we're coming. Lieutenant Saburo Nishida, a bomber pilot flying night harassment missions, grips the controls harder than he used to. He has flown these routes dozens of times. He knows the coastline, the cloud patterns, the altitude that once kept him safe from interception. But now, before he even reaches the target area, anti-aircraft fire begins. Not random bursts, not hopeful guessing. Controlled fire. Shells bloom at precise heights. Tracers intersect where his aircraft will be, not where it was. Nishida banks hard, sweat beading under his helmet, and for the first time, he understands something has fundamentally shifted. This is not reaction. This is anticipation. Below, American radar operators at Henderson Field track him calmly. Their scopes glow softly in darkened rooms. Bearings are passed to fire control crews. Altitude estimates refined. Timings synchronized. For them, the night is no longer empty space. It is data. Japanese commanders attempt to adapt. Some raids are delayed, others are split into smaller elements. Routes are changed nightly. Altitudes vary. Crews are instructed to fly lower, faster, riskier. Each change buys hours, sometimes days, never relief. Because the Americans are not defending a fixed tactic, they are refining a system. Radar operators log patterns, controllers learn tendencies, gunnery officers adjust timing. The machine learns. During one January raid, Nishida watches a fellow bomber disintegrate mid-air without warning. No fighter, no searchlight. Just sudden, lethal accuracy. The bomber never even reaches the sound of American engines. Back at Rabaul, after-action reports grow darker. Words like unexpected, premature interception, and radar-guided fire appear with increasing frequency. Senior commanders can no longer dismiss them. The night battles around Guadalcanal are no longer contests of skill. They are contests of awareness, and awareness now belongs to the Americans. On the water, the same pattern emerges. Japanese surface groups probing Iron Bottom Sound are detected at long range. Radar-equipped American destroyers maneuver early, denying torpedo solutions before they exist. Engagements become brief, inconclusive, and costly. Japanese ships withdraw, having achieved nothing, except attrition. Guadalcanal was supposed to be bled dry under cover of darkness. Instead, it bleeds Japan. Commander Tanaka watches this with a growing sense of inevitability. The Americans are not winning night battles by brilliance or daring. They are winning by removing uncertainty. And doctrine built on uncertainty collapses when certainty appears. By January 1943, the Japanese Navy faces an unspoken truth. Night combat no longer guarantees advantage. And without that advantage, the entire operational calculus changes. Supply convoys become vulnerable. Airfields cannot be suppressed. Losses increase faster than they can be replaced. Crews gain experience, and then are lost. Radar has done something more dangerous than counter-tactic. It has compressed time. Decisions that once took minutes now take seconds. Reactions that once depended on human senses now occur electronically. The Americans see first, move first, fire first. The night, once Japan's shield, has become its exposure. And as winter deepens in the Solomons, Tanaka knows the campaign's outcome is no longer in doubt. Guadalcanal will not fall, not because Japan lacks courage, but because courage cannot blind an enemy who no longer needs eyes. February 1943, Guadalcanal campaign, final phase. By February, the night has lost its mystery. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, this is the most unsettling transformation of all. War is expected to be violent, chaotic, cruel. But it is not supposed to become predictable, not in this direction. Yet that is exactly what has happened. Japanese commanders now plan night operations knowing, in advance, that they will likely be detected. The question is no longer if the Americans will react, but how quickly. This is a catastrophic inversion of doctrine. Commander Tanaka reviews the latest operational summaries with a sinking feeling. Night sorties have dropped in effectiveness to near zero. Losses continue. Fuel is wasted. Aircraft return damaged or not at all. Crews who once flew with confidence now fly with resignation. And worst of all, nothing seems to surprise the enemy anymore. American radar operators rotate shifts seamlessly. New men replace veterans without a collapse in effectiveness. Training manuals are updated in real time. Lessons learned at Guadalcanal are transmitted to other fleets, other islands, other controllers. Radar knowledge spreads faster than pilots can be trained. This is where Japan truly falls behind. Its doctrine depends on elite skill built over years, night navigation, visual acuity, instinct honed through repetition. When those men are lost, their replacements are shadows, brave but unprepared. America, meanwhile, replaces functions, not heroes. A radar operator is trained in weeks. A controller learns vectors and timing. A gunnery officer learns to trust the scope over instinct. When one man is lost, the system absorbs it. By mid-February, the decision is made quietly. Japanese forces will evacuate Guadalcanal under cover of night. The irony is not lost on Tanaka. The same darkness that once delivered victory must now be used for retreat. Slipping away while the Americans watch, track, and allow it, choosing not to risk unnecessary losses. Even retreat is granted. On the final nights, Japanese ships run hard and fast, engines pushed to their limits, crews tense and silent. Radar contacts flicker on American scopes, but orders hold. Let them go. The Americans have learned something more valuable than destruction. They have learned control. When the last Japanese forces withdraw, the campaign ends not with a climactic night battle, but with silence. Guadalcanal is secure, and with it, something larger is decided. Radar has proven itself, not as a novelty, not as an aid, but as a weapon system that reshapes combat itself. It does not fire bullets. It fires information. Japanese commanders no longer laugh at radar. They fear it, because they finally understand what it represents. A future where battles are decided before the first shot is fired, where detection matters more than courage, where the side that sees first dictates the terms of every engagement. Tanaka writes his final campaign assessment with careful restraint. Enemy radar employment has neutralized our night advantage. Without corrective measures, continued losses are inevitable. Corrective measures never come. Japan does not have the industry, does not have the time, does not have the margin for experimentation. America does, and radar spreads from Guadalcanal to the Central Pacific, from ships to fighters, from defense to offense. Night ceases to be sanctuary everywhere American forces arrive. By the time Japanese commanders fully accept what radar has done, the war has already moved beyond recovery. They had trained men to master darkness. America taught machines to eliminate it. The laughter ended not in a single night, but in a pattern, one failed raid after another, until the truth became impossible to ignore. Night attacks did not fail because Japanese pilots lost skill. They failed because the night itself was taken away. Mid-late 1943, the Pacific War expands. The lesson of Guadalcanal does not stay at Guadalcanal. It travels, quietly at first, embedded in after-action reports, training memoranda, updated procedures, then more visibly as American task forces move north and west, carrying radar with them like an invisible shield. For Japanese commanders, the pattern becomes unmistakable. Everywhere American forces establish themselves, the night changes. At sea, radar-equipped destroyers screen carrier groups with precision. Enemy surface ships are detected long before visual contact. Torpedoes miss because targets maneuver early. Engagements end before they begin. In the air, radar-controlled interception becomes routine. Fighters are guided into position without searchlights. Anti-aircraft fire grows tighter, more economical, more lethal. What once required intuition now requires coordination. And coordination favors the side with machines. Rear Admiral Raizo Tanaka, reviewing later campaigns, understands something that had been unthinkable in 1941. Japan has lost control of the tempo. Night attacks no longer dictate operations. They react to American systems instead of shaping them. Japanese commanders had believed technology was secondary to spirit. Radar proves the opposite. It does not replace courage. It makes courage irrelevant if used correctly. American radar doctrine spreads rapidly. Operators are standardized. Procedures formalized. Failures documented and corrected. Radar is no longer an experiment. It is infrastructure. A pilot shot down is tragic. A radar station improved is inevitable. By 1944, night no longer belongs to anyone. It belongs to whoever controls information. Japanese commanders stop laughing entirely. Radar is no longer mocked. It is respected, resented, and feared. But by now, it is everywhere. Integrated into fleets, airfields, bombers, fighters. There is no going back to darkness. One Japanese officer writes bitterly in his diary, "We trained to see in the dark. They trained to erase it." That sentence captures the war's turning point, better than any battle. The failure of night attacks is not about Guadalcanal alone. It is about a shift in how war is fought. The Americans do not win because their pilots are braver or their ships faster. They win because they remove uncertainty. Radar does not guarantee victory, but it denies surprise. And surprise was Japan's most precious currency. Without it, every attack costs more. Every failure compounds. By the time Japanese commanders fully accept radar's role, the Pacific War has entered a phase where recovery is impossible. Production gaps widen. Training pipelines collapse. Losses are permanent. Guadalcanal was not the end of Japan's night warfare. It was the beginning of its irrelevance. The laughter that once dismissed radar fades into something quieter. Recognition. Machines do not sleep. Machines do not tire. Machines do not forget lessons learned. And once the night was mapped, measured, and controlled, it could never be reclaimed. The war did not change because Japanese commanders lost confidence. It changed because the night itself was taken away.